you like to see changed, and how do you think things have moved on and progressed for the Roma community in Europe in the last number of years?
Good morning. First of all, I would say one sentence about this chance to be here, because I think this is crucial and really important, and not just for myself, for a young Roma who can present myself like a successful story, but even to present the Roma youth, because I think we also need to be visible and to raise our voice if we're talking about a future of young citizens, because I think it's something different if we're talking about the future for young citizens and also when we're talking about the future for young Roma citizens, because even if we are the same European citizens, we don't have the same access and we don't have the same rights, same equal rights around Europe, which I think this is one big topic and big issue we should discuss about it, and to raise questions why it can happen in 2013 and also in this century in the world. In the other hand, I would say, as far as I see in Europe, the anti-Gypsyism, the extremism and racism is growing up.
Right.
And also, this is something that building up the social exclusion and not building up the inclusion, what we are talking about. And I know in the European level, you also policymakers and also just the youngsters are working on to building up, for instance, national strategies and to building up a Roma decade. But as far as we see in the local level and in the grassroots level, it's failing because we don't see positive results.
Really? So
And to tell you why, I mean, of course, you know better than me that quarter of the European youngsters are unemployed. But for instance, the young Roma, I think 1 of 3 young Roma has only a job. So
two-thirds.
So 2/3 are unemployed, and when we are talking about unemployment, I would say it's a lifelong unemployment. And of course, the European youngsters are losing the trust in the European Union if we won't make new placements or new jobs. But just to imagine that if somebody like a Roma youngsters doesn't have a job even for all life, that what kind of trust not to lose, but even to think about, do they ever had this kind of trust, not just in Europe, but in other things. And these are raising up other questions, like for instance, I think the key word of employment, it's education. But all over in Europe, we can see segregated schools,
right.
And I think this is something that you also know. And I think first step is to stop the school segregation, and then to have equal access to Roma youngsters for education.
Right.
And then I think this is the way to find jobs. But for instance, in Hungary, 1% of the university students are Roma only, and so I can ask many questions.
Out of a population of how much? So 1% are university students?
No, I mean all of the universities,
yes.
Hungarian university students are 1%.
1%. But of the population, what percentage? So.
Good question. Good question, but I think less than 1%, right. I would say. So it's very few.
And is it an issue? It's access to education, but as well as that, it's ensuring that people stay in education. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Right. And in terms of the workplace as well, as you said, it's quite difficult. So have you seen an improvement in attitudes in Europe in recent years, or have you seen changes to the way people think about inclusion, about the needs of Roma people?
I won't say it's getting better. I've seen that, as I told you, the racism is growing, and also between youngsters, racism is growing, which can build up. As far as I see, for instance, in Europe, it can build up the populist parties' life, because in Europe, as far as I see now, we need the guilty group, and for example, in the in the youngsters group, that's what I see. Also in university students, and it's not depends on education. I mean, it's the youngsters also make the Roma students are guilty.
Great. Excellent. Thank you very much. We'll take some questions now, I think. Right. We've quite a few speakers to get in before we break at 10:30. So I'm going to suggest that we limit our contributions to about 90 seconds, and that way we'll make sure that we get as many people in as possible. The first contributor is Mr. Andrius Mazuronis from Lithuania.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Actually, I have to admit I'm a little bit confused because I had written some notes about youth unemployment and youth problems in general in EU, but I see that now we're speaking about discrimination, which is also issue extremely important and for us also. And I have to admit that I am very happy that this kind of issue is discussed here in this forum. And I have to promise that during our presidency, our upcoming presidency from the 1st of July, we will try to keep up, I think, with the same format of discussion, which is extremely useful, what I have heard here today. And actually my question would be, I won't read the notes which I had about youth unemployment. I think this is the issue we will discuss somewhere else. But I will ask probably all three panelists who've been speaking here, could you suggest to, I don't know, is it to all of us politicians or only for me, but it would be extremely important to hear your opinion, how we should start to speak about discrimination issues with our society, when sometimes we feel that the society is still probably not ready, not always ready to speak about certain issues which we understand that should be discussed, but actually probably they are not very popular, they are not very, let's say, on the top agenda to discuss for politicians in some of the countries, and how we should start to I'm sorry, Chair, but it's extremely important for me, and it's really very interesting to hear your opinion on that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Ms. Anna Birchall from Romania.
Thank you, Chairman. Tinerii, familiile tinere trebuie să devină într-adevăr o prioritate economică și socială pentru Uniunea Europeană, dincolo de cuvintele frumoase pe care le spunem tot timpul. Deși România stă mai bine comparativ cu alte state ale Uniunii Europene la nivel de șomaj în rândul tinerilor,
let me assure you that creating jobs and fighting unemployment in Romania among young people are priorities for the new government. I personally believe that each euro that we spend on education, on creating jobs, should not be seen as an expense, but rather as an investment in the future of Europe, because it is our duty to unlock the talents that can be found in the European Union. And I would like to ask the panelists a question. Given your experience, and I would like to congratulate the Irish presidency for the Youth Guarantee, what are the 5 measures that can really unlock the talents that exist in Europe, but which need to be well fed in order to grow and develop, in order to keep Europe competitive, because we have many well-prepared young people in other areas of the world, and in a globalized economy it is essential to keep Europe competitive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fritz Neubauer from Austria.
Herr Vorsitzender, Kolleginnen und Kollegen, ich denke, dass
Colleagues,
die Binsenweisheit alle unterschreiben können.
I think that we can also
Weniger Bildung
subscribe to
ist
the
weniger Chance am
attitude
Arbeitsmarkt. Keine
that
Bildung
says that if
heißt
you have
Arbeitslosigkeit.
lower levels of attitude of education, you have lower levels of employment.
Ausbildung, Entwicklung, Forschung,
So I think we need to
absolute
focus on
Priorität.
education, training, research as an absolute priority. Austria can say with some degree of pride that our youth unemployment rates is the lowest in in Europe. But we still need to improve the already good levels. Earlier in the past, the Swedish Prime Minister has given Austria as an example when it comes to unemployment levels and youth education and training. For us, we don't see the transition between school people spend part of the week still in school, in the classroom, but the other part of the week already in a company. So they have, as it were, one foot in each camp. And I think that is partly what explains our low unemployment rates. And the day after tomorrow, I think this is something which should have absolute priority in the upcoming European summit. We need not only clear commitment to tackling youth unemployment, but we also need action as well as words. And we would very much welcome that if that 6 billion euros, which has been provided for a longer period, would be even dispersed even earlier. Thank you.
Janja Napast from Slovenia.
Dear guests, dear chairman, dear colleagues, I'm a deputy of the National Assembly and I represent all citizens of Slovenia, but I am the youngest female deputy, and this is why I can represent the youth. This is why I'm really glad that we also have the representative of the youth among the panelists. We need their experience because this is also a crown of this session. The young people can contribute to a better future for all, if of course you listen to us. On the Youth Employment Initiative, I would like to point out that when it comes to MFF, Slovenia is not eligible to funds from this initiative because we didn't want to oppose it, because we know that this is a very important issue in Europe. But I would still like to highlight that when it comes to Eurostat report, unemployment in Slovenia between December 2011 and 2012 increased by 40%, and this is the hugest increase out of all member states in the EU. This is why we hope that member states and the Parliament will look favorably on our proposal, which is that also those regions that witnessed unemployment increase more by 30% on an annual basis. And I hope that these regions will also be eligible to new funds.
Next speaker is Paola Carinelli from Italy.
Thank you. Well, I would like to thank today's guests for a very interesting contribution. Thanks to recent elections, we have a renewed parliament in Italy, and we have plenty of young people now, finally, I would say. And we are particularly concerned about the issue of youth unemployment. At the moment, our Prime Minister is in Parliament having discussions with members of Parliament preparing for the next summit. And we are fully aware of the level of the crisis and how urgent things are. So the Prime Minister is going to ask that the financing through the youth guarantee be dispersed already, largely speaking, by 2014. But that's not going to be enough. In Italy, what we need above all is more radical change, more structural changes. We need to be able to guarantee the right to study, to be able to update and change curricula and so on. I would hope that Europe will not just be a donor, but that Europe will also ensure that these funds are properly spent. We hope that Europe will be able to act as a guarantor for these structural funds, which really are something we need urgently in Italy.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Nia Griffith from the House of Commons in the UK.
Thank you very much. Now, I come from an area called Wales, which is part of the United Kingdom. And in Wales, we have a programme called Jobs Growth Wales. This is a programme which finds placements for young people in private industry and has an 80% success rate in them carrying on after their 6-month placement. Now, if we're going to have that sort of programme across Europe, we actually need a stimulus to the economy, because it's only by having a stimulus to an economy that we can actually make the jobs last and make them become real jobs. Now, obviously, we should always upskill our young people, and particularly those who come from disadvantaged groups. But we must not blame our young people and say that the unemployment problem is due to their lack of skills. It is not. It's quite clear to me that we have postgraduates doing jobs which graduates would do, graduates doing jobs which 18-year-old school leavers would do, 18-year-old school leavers doing that which 16-year-olds would do, and of course, the 3 speakers earlier illustrated the groups that really suffer when there are difficulties getting jobs and are always left at the back of the queue. So what we've got to focus on is getting the economy right, but getting outcomes, making sure that what we offer young people turns into a real job, and making sure that we don't just pay lip service to righting the discrimination that we face in society, but that we actually do something very real.
Thank you very much. Right, we'll have some comments maybe from the panel. I'll start off with Marietta. Would you like to comment on some of those questions?
Magyarul válaszolnék, ha nem bánják.
I'm going to speak Hungarian. I'm going to use my mother tongue because the first question which I want to answer is a bit complicated. What I want to address is how to present problems of discrimination for society. I believe that this is something which we should now forget how to present it, namely the way of presenting it, because we have certain racist actions behind us. Human lives are at stake. So this is a point, we are at a point when this should not be a question, an issue anymore. We should go much deeper into the problems. The question is not if somebody from the Roma community or from an LGBT community or a young person in general, why this person does not get a job. But what we are talking about is daily severe discrimination. How to present it, how to describe it. Well, I think there are a lot of NGOs. I don't want to stress the role of NGOs, but all of us are aware that we have to include the young persons as well. Social cooperation from the side of the entire society is needed. So this process should be faster. We should speed up these activities. There are a lot of campaigns, well-functioning practices. I do think that we should take stock of all these practices and see what works and what does not. Thank you very much.
Rachel, would you like to comment on this?
I was just going to say that with discrimination, I think the best way to tackle it from the very beginning is through schools, because children have I suppose, they're like an empty slate. And I find with children, they're just so innocent that they question you about, what's wrong with you, and they learn from an early age how to kind of deal with people that aren't the same as themselves. And I think, as one of the gentlemen said, that the way to begin to tackle discrimination is through schools, school programs.
I think I'll get back to the same question. Well, a lot of countries have their own issues, but Lithuania has also its own issues when it comes to homosexuality. I suggest that you talk about discrimination by first canceling the recent law you passed about anti-homosexuality in the name of protecting underage people. That could be one of the ways to start with.
Minister, would you like to get in there?
Thank you very much, Dominic. Just a couple of points, particularly in relation to the youth guarantee. I think the remarks made by Austria and the track record that Austria has in a number of other countries, indeed in many ways mirror the thinking on the youth guarantee, because Austria has been doing a lot of good work in this respect itself, as has a number of other European Union countries too. And perhaps it is true, it is because there is a greater and a closer relationship between the education system in Austria and training and skills acquisition than perhaps some of the other educational systems. But what is intended in relation to the youth guarantee is that there should be at least 6 billion, and that 6 billion would be front-loaded into the years 2014, 2015, so that we're not talking about it being extended right across the board, that initially that this will be the focus of it. And of course, governments themselves can put matching funds together and therefore extend the value of it as well. And at the same time, as was mentioned by, I think it was the United Kingdom representative, that you need to stimulate the economy. That's very important, because we're talking about trying to create employment. But initially, the most important focus of dealing with the youth guarantee was to ensure that young people did not fall into long-term unemployment. And that's the key to it, so that therefore they would be kept out of long-term unemployment and therefore then be gradually able to move into the workforce fully and properly. How to go about it? I think the youth conference that we held here in Dublin in March of this year was what we intended to have was, and what we did is succeed in having, was a structured dialogue with young people, with large numbers of young people, because that is a big challenge. How are you going to come up with the solutions unless you consult the young people? Adults, they may think they have the solutions, but of course they don't. And therefore, we have to find new ways of engaging with young people, and we must find new ways of having structured dialogue with young people. So I think there's a challenge there for all the countries in the European Union, and indeed the European Union itself as a community. And finally, can I say that the real challenge is to get economic development and to get economic integration and to get social integration. So it's first of all, the economic development has to take place, but if economic development doesn't take place without economic integration, especially by the marginalised people that we have heard from our three panellists here at the present time, well then there's going to be no social integration. So there's another big challenge in that respect as well.
Thank you, Minister. The next contributor is Ms. Agnieszka Pomaska from Poland.
Bardzo dziękuję, panie przewodniczący. Dziękuję też za te głosy młodych osób. Myślę, że to bardzo ciekawa formuła, chociaż pozwolę sobie stwierdzić, że temat jest tak rozległy, że każdej z pań moglibyśmy poświęcić oddzielny temat i oddzielny panel, i na pewno ta dyskusja byłaby równie ciekawa. Ja chciałam nawiązać do tego, co powiedziała Rachel, i też napisała o tym w swoim materiale. Wspomniała dużo o mobilności, o tym, z jakimi barierami się zmaga. Myślę, że w kontekście bezrobocia powinniśmy też wspomnieć o tym, jak ważna jest mobilność zawodowa, zwłaszcza młodych ludzi w skali całej Unii Europejskiej. To jest ważne narzędzie stanowiące szansę na przezwyciężenie problemu wysokiego bezrobocia, i o tym powinniśmy pamiętać, i wszystkie pomysły, które od czasu do czasu pojawiają się, żeby zamknąć granice, ograniczać rynki pracy w ramach Unii Europejskiej, są pomysłami, które będą szkodziły rozwiązywaniu problemów, jakie mamy z bezrobociem. Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Gordon Jandrovic from Croatia. With apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dear colleagues, it is a pleasure to address you today, only a few days before Croatia becomes the European Union member state. There are many reasons why Croatia decided to join the European Union, but amongst the more important reasons were the benefits for its young citizens. Therefore, it is important to Croatia as the next European Union member state to convey to its youth all the knowledge and experience gained in the accession process, as well as to continuously communicate to them the nature and logic of the European Union. Youth is the part of society that can benefit most from the processes of European integration and the unprecedented mobility of individuals that comes along with them. In that sense, the European Union provides many opportunities to its youth, some of which young people of Croatia already use. For example, Croatia is included in the Erasmus program of academic mobility since 2011, and through it, a notable number of our students got to spend a part of their college education abroad. I believe education is a crucial tool in combating youth unemployment, a problem mentioned many times during this conference, which is an area where the European Union should use its resources to make a difference. Therefore, educational programs of the European Union will always enjoy our support, and we will be glad to promote them whenever we can. I hope that our youth will use all the new opportunities provided with the European Union membership of Croatia, and that the European Union will continue to be a stimulating environment for its young citizens.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Konstantinos Triantafyllos from Greece.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ, κύριε Πρόεδρε. Θα ήθελα να σας συγχαρώ και εσάς αλλά και τους ομιλητές για τις πολύ ενδιαφέρουσες και ολοκληρωμένες τοποθετήσεις σας. Θα ξεκινήσω λέγοντας ότι θα είμαι εκτός θέματος. Δεν θα μιλήσω για το ευρωπαϊκό μέλλον των νέων πολιτών, αλλά για το ευρωπαϊκό παρόν αυτών. Και αν θεωρήσουμε ότι η οικονομική κρίση δεν θα κρατήσει για πάντα, και ίσως να μην είναι και η μόνη που θα ζήσουμε ως νέοι άνθρωποι, θα έπρεπε να εστιάσουμε σήμερα στην Ευρώπη στο πώς θα αντιμετωπίσουμε τις συνέπειες αυτής της κρίσης στις πιο ευάλωτες ομάδες του νεανικού της πληθυσμού. Γιατί, όπως συμβαίνει σε κάθε δημοκρατία, έτσι και στην Ευρώπη, κάθε φορά που ένας άνθρωπος με αναπηρία, ένα άτομο που έχει διαφορετική σεξουαλική ταυτότητα ή ένας Ρωμά αντιμετωπίζει προβλήματα στο να βρει δουλειά ή νιώθει περιθωριοποιημένος ή είναι περιθωριοποιημένος, τότε το σύστημά μας καταραίει. Τότε η δημοκρατία μας αντιμετωπίζει προβλήματα στην ίδια της την ύπαρξη. Κάθε φορά που βλέπουμε τον αριθμό των needs, δηλαδή των ανθρώπων που είναι εκτός απασχόλησης, εκτός εκπαίδευσης, εκτός κατάρτισης, να αυξάνεται, κάθε φορά τότε η Ευρώπη μας δεν συγκλίνει με το όραμά της, το πρώτο ιδεώδες. Και γι' αυτόν τον λόγο θα ήθελα να υποβάλω ερωτήματα και στους τέσσερις ομιλητές σχετικά με τις πολιτικές που παρουσιάζουμε στα χαρτιά, εάν τελικά φτάνουν στις κοινωνίες και στην πραγματική μας ζωή.
The next speaker is Ms. Martha de Boer from the Netherlands.
Dank u. Ik zou willen beginnen met de jongeren bedanken voor hun indrukwekkende bijdrage. Ik bewonder hun moed om hier te pleiten voor een inclusief Europa, een pleidooi dat ik ook van harte ondersteun. En ik wil ook het Ierse voorzitterschap bedanken voor het uitnodigen van deze jongeren en het agenderen van de positie van jongeren uit meer gemarginaliseerde groepen. Ik onderschrijf de oproep van de jongeren om bij alle regelgeving na te gaan of alle jongeren in al hun diversiteit hier ook werkelijk van profiteren. En als we dan spreken over de maatregelen ter bestrijding van jeugdwerkloosheid, zullen we ook echt moeten nagaan hoe deze ook werkelijk ten goede komen aan alle jongeren. Dan gaat het om toegang tot werk, opleidingen, stageplaatsen. En ik kan me voorstellen dat het dan niet volstaat om alleen die generieke maatregelen te nemen, maar dat er ook specifieke maatregelen nodig zijn. En ik zou daarom aan jongeren willen vragen, hoe kunnen we zorgen dat ook alle jongeren profiteren van bijvoorbeeld zo'n jeugdactieplan, zo'n jeugdgarantieplan? Hebben jullie suggesties voor concrete maatregelen? En aan minister Costello zou ik willen vragen, ik heb de laatste commissiemededeling van 19 juni gelezen en daarin vind ik helemaal niets terug over gemarginaliseerde groepen. Hoe kunnen we zorgen dat ook in de Europese maatregelen en in de actieplannen van de landen juist die positie van die groepen terugkomt? Dank u wel.
The next speaker is Mr. Phidias Sarikas from Cyprus.
Ναι, κύριε Πρόεδρε, κυρίες και κύριοι συνάδελφοι, θέλω να συγχαρώ τις τρεις κυρίες για τις ενδιαφέρουσες τοποθετήσεις τους, οι οποίες αναδεικνύουν ότι το πρόβλημα των διακρίσεων σε βάρος διαφόρων ομάδων πληθυσμού είναι υπαρκτό και είναι κάτι που θα πρέπει να συνεχίσει να μας απασχολεί σε ευρωπαϊκό και εθνικό επίπεδο. Έχουμε ακόμη πολύ δρόμο να διανύσουμε για να αποβάλουμε τα διάφορα ταμπού που εγκλωβίζουν πολίτες και πολιτικούς σε απόψεις παρεχομένων εποχών, με αποτέλεσμα σε κάποιες χώρες, όπως και η δική μου μπορώ να πω, να υπάρχει καθυστέρηση στη λήψη αποφάσεων και ψήφιση των αναγκαίων νομοθετικών πλαισίων για την πλήρη κατάργηση των όποιων διακρίσεων. Και θα ήθελα να ρωτήσω τις τρεις κυρίες κατά πόσο θεωρούν ότι η κατάργηση των διακρίσεων είναι θέμα
doing away with discrimination depends only on voting for the right laws, or is it more a question of awareness raising among citizens?
And we'll take Michaela Popa from Romania.
Mulțumesc, domnule președinte. Astăzi se vorbește tot mai mult despre criza economică și cei mai mulți
Everyone is talking about the economic crisis nowadays, and everyone tries to come up with the numbers to figure out how to come out of the crisis. But I believe that the real solution comes from young people and innovation. I'm a teacher, and I can tell you that everyone is focusing on getting as much information as possible instead of focusing on inclusion and discovering what is beautiful in all of us nowadays. Many young people are disoriented today. They are afraid to start a family. They are not prepared to face a Europe that they don't even know. I have a suggestion today. I believe that we need a commissioner for young people today. A commissioner for young people as we have a commissioner for agriculture, a commissioner in charge of the youth's vital problems, whether we speak of the Roma community or disadvantaged people or people with disabilities. We need a commissioner. I believe that the young people need to learn Europe's history because young Americans, they learn about American history, and I believe that young people should learn in school European history. Because we do have a history of the European Union. When I was young, I learned a false history during communism, and I believe that we should not repeat history all over again.
I'll ask Marietta maybe to respond briefly on behalf of the panel, and then the Minister.
Több kérdést is intéztek hozzánk.
Several questions were raised, and questions were asked about specific steps and actions. I guess that none of us is able to give specifics because we aren't politicians. We can be involved in monitoring. If a policy is implemented, then we, young persons, can get involved in monitoring and doing follow-up of these actions, either as participants or external viewers. So this is where the young should have a role. The commissioner for the youth or a delegation for the youth, whatever name you use for that, the most important thing is that you have to conduct an open discussion and dialogue with the young persons. What you should do is not addressing these issues at conferences that there is discrimination, but first of all you should have first-hand information and experience about what happens in the field, so to say. So open dialogue is very important. Sensitization, awareness raising are very important. But if you sanction hate speech, it's good, but you have to raise awareness.
Thank you. It's always much more difficult when it comes down to coming up with the specific solutions to the problems which all of us see. But I do think that we have tried during the Irish presidency to give examples of good practice. We did that in relation to having the homophobic bullying conference that we had here in Dublin, the LGBT youth and social inclusion event that we had here, and then having a special youth conference where we opened up structured engagement with young people so that they came up with their own ideas and so on. I think a lot more engagement with young people is required, and it's up to individual countries to find mechanisms, I believe, to engage with young people in a meaningful fashion, whether it is into the specific skills that we're talking about in terms of the Youth Unemployment Guarantee, the Youth Guarantee, because obviously there's a set list of what the Youth Guarantee skills, requirements and training and so on within the actual report that was produced. But nevertheless, I do think that there needs to be a strong youth involvement in its actual implementation. And the same is very true in relation to all the marginalised youth that we're talking about, that we need to get very strong engagement there. And finally, there has to be the combination of laws and education which will make the difference.
Thank you, Minister. The next contributor is Mr. Georgios Varamenos from Greece.
Colleagues, we're talking about young people in the west of Macedonia and northern Greece. We're talking about a 73% rate of unemployment, the highest in Europe, 72% rather. Nearly full unemployment, a shocking rate. If you look at Andalusia, the rates are similar. So from this point of view, everybody's a Roma in those regions of Europe. This is the result of a policy that is close to a racist policy. We create a Generation X, a lost generation. The best brains are leaving, they're going to the north of Europe or elsewhere in the world. We don't want them to leave, and they don't want to leave, but they have to. Every summer we're happy to welcome tourists from Germany, Finland and other countries. They know firsthand how hardworking Greeks can be, and they should not expect Bild-Zeitung to tell them about it. They just need work to do. We need to get out of the crisis, out of recession. In 1929 in the USA, the situation was not any worse regarding loss of income compared to the situation in Greece now. We know what President Roosevelt did. Instead of turning against the public sector, he focused on growth, not neoliberal policies and obsessions. Some try to benefit from the crisis in other countries, even though they're partners in the same community. So unless we do this, discrimination will go on forever, and the European elite will support fascism, even though they claim not to want to do this.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Olga Zrihan from Belgium.
Thank you, Chairman. We'd certainly agree that we've got a terribly high level of youth unemployment at the moment in Europe, which is against the basic principles of the European project, working towards a better future. And so apart from the fact that a lot of people are leaving countries, as my Greek colleague has pointed out, there's the social fabric and social links are being broken. Many young people have no prospects for the future, and they just live in a virtual world of the social networks. And added to that, you have all the discrimination that we've just been hearing about, and so it's very hard to avoid despair amongst young people. So we're talking about a tragedy of lives and a tragedy of employment. Now, initiatives have been taken which suggest that within 4 months you have to supply young people with quality jobs. The question is, of course, are we able to deliver on this, and are we able to monitor it? It shouldn't be a piecemeal approach. We need a global approach, and of course that means that at European level we very much beef up our industrial policy, because that's crucial so that we can have growth which provides prospects for our young people. It's fundamental not to separate the future of Europe from the prospects for young people.
Is Mr. Carlos Sao Martino from Portugal.
Muito obrigado, Sr. Presidente. O desemprego jovem alastra rapidamente em toda a Europa, em especial nos países sob resgate.
Youth unemployment is spreading across Europe, and particularly in my country. Laszlo Andor at the European Commissioner for Employment says that if we don't take measures quickly, Europe will lose an entire generation. So we need to resolve this issue, and we need freedom, we need solidarity, we need to give people their rights. Many young people who are unemployed come from marginalized sections of society, and this is becoming a big difficulty in Europe. And I think at the next summit we need to put this on the agenda, youth and unemployment, and in particular SMEs as creators of jobs. We need to renew Europe. We need to take strong measures that will bring results. And we need to focus on the real economy. And when you're talking about that, you're talking about small and medium-sized enterprises. Because Europe seems to be infringing its own principles of the free market.
Thank you very much.
So,
Mr.
thank you very much.
From Estonia.
Aitäh, härra eesistuja.
Thank you, Chair. The youth unemployment is a very important topic because this is the source of many problems in societies and also the source of discrimination. And I congratulate Ireland on success in this area. But we shouldn't deal only with the problems of social affairs and so on. We should also deal with the causes. Estonia has a high unemployment rate, but we also have lack of labor. This is also a problem for many other countries where the demographic processes and economic development have not been very good. There is aging and there are less and less taxpayers in society. So we think that we should modernize our education systems, vocational training and higher education systems should be more suited for labor markets. And we also should make our labor markets more flexible in order to make it possible for young people to enter the labor market, because sustainable jobs are in the private market. We should include the private sector as well, and structural reforms have to be made in our own home countries, in our parliaments, in our governments. Brussels is not the one to deliver this. Thank you.
Panimondas Marias from Greece.
Youth
unemployment is at a very high level all over Europe. This leads to marginalization. In Greece, youth unemployment has reached it's over 60%, while at the same period, the last 3 years that is, Greece received credit from the IMF and EU countries of 215 billion euro. We're talking about an enormous amount of money. It's an entire Marshall Plan. We still have 1,500,000 unemployed in Europe. This means that the money lent was not invested in the real economy. This money did not create jobs. It was simply used to pay off our debtors and to save banks, German, French, Greek banks. The fact that we have such unemployment rates at this point in time indicates that the model implemented by the Troika in Greece has failed. The IMF has admitted this. The same thing applies to those countries that are under an adjustment program with the presence of a Troika, because in these cases too they have to limit spending for education and training. So instead of investing in a knowledge economy, instead of investing in a Europe that will be competitive because it will be investing in innovation, we end up having the opposite result. We reduce spending. So we're moving towards a Europe that's not competitive because we are moving in the direction of China as regards salary levels. And lack of equality also increases unemployment.
Mr. Rafał Trzaskowski from the European Parliament.
Well, I mean, in order to tackle unemployment and exclusion of young people, you know, we can do quite a lot of things in the European Union. I mean, first of all, in order to stimulate growth, we have to finally accept and agree the multi-annual financial perspective, the budget of the EU, and I hope we'll be doing it soon. Secondly, there's quite a lot to do in the member states themselves. I mean, through economic semester, we can try to fight for flexible labor codes, have good benchmarks like flexicurity in the Scandinavian countries. And thirdly, and this is a message to Rachel, I mean, there is digital exclusion with which we are fighting in the European Union. There's a niche of 80 million people, and we've been always talking about it, but finally we're doing something about it in order to open up that niche and treat it in terms of internal market. This is a win-win situation for everyone, and we have to try to find these niches in order to boost growth, and through that also fight exclusion of the young people. And for the first time, we are in the European Union thinking about exclusion in terms which might help. We're trying to look at it holistically, and that's what the European Commission is now preparing. And hopefully that will bring measures which can actually lead to specific improvement. But my question to you would be, to the three of you, what specific measures would you be expecting from the European Union? If you were to give us one example, but not talking about dialogue, having commissioners and so on and so forth. You know, we are good at dialogue, but it comes, you know, what we are really now interested about is effective measures. What would be your advice? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Rachel and Nevin to answer those questions. First, Rachel.
Well, in relation to youth unemployment, I'm not actually in the jobs market at the moment. I have to finish off college, but I find that people like myself are hesitant about going out into the jobs market because there's this concept that if you hire someone with a disability, it means, you know, adapting your environment and being, you know, accepting that at times they may not be as able to work as everyone else. But, and I suppose, like, as well, the thing is with the funding, you know, with the EU or the world in such a state at the moment in regards to the recession, that, like, people, they need to accept that disabled people can give as much as everybody else. You know, that, like, if you hire this person over someone else, you might find that they give you more, you know, their, like, education has kind of opened up the barriers to me in a way, and you know, I feel that, like, there just needs to be more acceptance that disabled people are, you know, equal to everyone else.
Thank you very much. Nevin?
I don't know all the names of the legislation you have, so I wouldn't be able to give a particular name of what you asked, but I would prioritize protection in workplace. I think that is the most important thing, at least for the LGBT community, because if you don't have money, if you don't have your family supporting you, if you don't have friends that are backing you up, being gay, being trans, being a lesbian won't take you far, because you need money for your own self-sustainability. And I would say protection, that is one of the first things that that EU has been discussing with my own country from the beginning, that it is still pending, it is still waiting on the table, and that has not been any step taken when it comes to protection in employment. But I don't know if I'm allowed to get back to one of the other questions very quickly. I can say I think it would be really good if we could listen to other colleagues from what we represent here and LGBT representatives in Europe. I think implementing the laws is the tricky part of the question. But for you to implement something, you need something written on the paper. And in Turkey, and in a lot of countries, there's nothing written on the paper, but there is one law that does mention homosexuality, which is the army legislation, and which talks about homosexuality in a way it is a psychosexual disorder. So in that sense, it is being implemented in Turkey against the LGBT community.
Thank you very much. We have 6 more speakers to come, and we're limited in time. So I'm going to ask speakers to just take 1 minute of time, and that means we can get everybody in and we can get some answers as well. So the first of those is Zanda Kalnina Lukasevica from Latvia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank the young people who take part in the discussion today. I join the opinion that we don't have to talk that much about the youth problems in conferences behind closed doors, but we need to have an open discussion. So I would like to thank the Irish presidency. 3 brief points. Firstly, I think that during the next budget period, the youth guarantee funding has to be treated as stimulus, not as a complete cover-up of all needs, but it's just a stimulus. And we need to think about a clever use of money. Let us not create subsidies that are not sustainable, but let's think about real opportunities and competitiveness of youth. Thirdly, I think that it is very important to accumulate experience, exchange experience, both good experience and bad experience, which we shouldn't repeat. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Maria Helena Andre from Portugal.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, it's very difficult to speak in structured way in just a minute, but I think that we can see that there has been some progress with some sort of respect. I think it is possible to change the approach. We need to change the approach from austerity, and we're starting to talk about a guarantee for young people, and we need to stimulate the economy to create growth and jobs. Now, if we don't actually manage to invest in education and training as well, and help people to keep their jobs, then we won't be able to protect basic social standards, which will allow us to protect the young and those who are no longer so young. We need to protect people's livelihoods and protect people against precarious employment and make sure that there's real solidarity between generations.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Peter.
So we've just got to be more efficient in all these areas.
Chairman, colleagues, I am convinced that the high unemployment rate among young persons is not only an economic problem. This generation is the future of Europe, but they don't have any meaningful purpose in life. Therefore, we need to show real perspective for them so that the anti-EU feelings should not lead to the spreading of extremism. This relates to another issue which was discussed yesterday, namely the link between European Union and national parliaments. Further development of the EU will restrict national sovereignty and will reshape the role of national parliaments. Young persons, voters of the future, should be clear about what the European Union offers to nations, because citizens do want to know what they get in exchange for shrinking national sovereignty. European Parliament elections are here around the corner. If you are not able to give any vision for young persons, this will lead to a lower voter turnout and Eurosceptic parties will gain ground.
From Italy.
Grazie Presidente.
Thank you, Chairman.
C'è la Carta dei diritti fondamentali dell'Unione
There is the
Europea, poi
Charter
una
of
serie di
Fundamental
direttive
Rights
già
and a
approvate
series
che
of directives that have already
impediscono
been
ogni
approved,
forma di
which ban
discriminazione
any
e
form
facilitano anche
of
sul piano
discrimination
legislativo e giuridico l'ingresso, l'accesso
access
dei giovani
of
nel
young
mercato del
people
lavoro
into the labour
senza
market
nessuna forma di
without being subject to
discriminazione.
any form of discrimination.
Quindi le norme che
So,
vietano forme di
the
discriminazione e
rules
favoriscono
which
l'integrazione
ban
esistono e
discrimination and
come è stato
facilitate
detto
integration
negli
already
interventi di
exist.
questa mattina,
However, as we've heard this
esiste
morning,
ancora
we
una
still
struttura del
have
mercato del lavoro
an
europeo
European
che
labour
ancora non
market structure
consente
which
l'accesso
does
a
not
tutti nel
allow
mondo del
access
lavoro,
for
nel
all
senso
to
che
the labour
esistono
market,
ancora forme
because
diffuse
there are
di
still
discriminazione.
various forms of
Chiedo
discrimination active
allora
out there.
di suggerire a noi
So,
legislatori, al di là delle
could we
norme che
suggest
già
to the legislators,
esistono,
above and beyond the
in che
standards that already
modo
exist,
si
could
può
we ask
favorire un effettivo
how
ingresso nel
exactly
mondo del
we could
lavoro senza
facilitate real
discriminazione
access
per
without discrimination to
dare
the
una
labour market?
scossa a questo mercato del lavoro che è ancora chiuso e ancora
How can we open up
consente
the labour market? How
effettivamente
can we
forme di
stop
discriminazione.
discrimination?
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Maria Helena Andre from Portugal.
I've already spoken.
Yes, I thought so. Yes, I was led to believe you hadn't, but I thought you had. Pascal Donoghue from Ireland.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to our panel for your contribution this morning. I have a particular question for Rachel. In the text of your speech that was circulated to us, you make reference to an EU disability card. And could you just explain to me what you mean by that concept and what difference it could make to you living your life? And then a broader question to the rest of the panel. Is there any piece of legislation at the moment and law in your home country that symbolises for you discrimination? I know Nevin has already partially answered this question, but if you could just allow us to understand as legislators, if there's anything that could be removed to deal with the concerns you've talked about, what would that be? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pascal. And finally, we have Mr. Miguel Martinez from the European Parliament.
Well, thank you, Chairman. First of all, can I express my solidarity with the three young panelists? Discrimination is not just targeted at young people. All the types of discrimination we've talked about affect young people and adults. But I think it's very good to see that after a lot of pressure, at last youth unemployment has become a priority. But it's very important that we make sure that when we look at the summit, that we reject the total irony of saying 6 billion is enough to deal with the problem. We're talking about 20 per head. It's a joke in very bad taste. And we also ought to reject what we often hear people say, that young people are the citizens of the future. They're the citizens of today.
Okay, we have a few minutes left, so I'm going to ask each of the speakers to briefly respond. I'll start with Marietta and then work through.
Coming back to the question of specifics and that not only dialogue should be used. Well, I do believe an important thing is the protection of the job. We should avoid that we feel safe at our workplace only 2 or 3 months, and this relates to the situation that when we get a job, then this should not be a short-term employment, a trainee for 2 or 3 months. It is a very important thing, and we also know that we need to create jobs, but probably not the presence of the three of us would make a major contribution to this in any of the countries. But I do believe that needs, good practices are ones that we are able to assess and we can add to them, because this we do make a difference in this issue. The fact that unemployment has become an issue on the agenda is due to us young persons expressing our views about that. So a couple of minutes of very short time, but I do believe there will be a continuation.
Okay, 90 seconds to answer the question. Apart from the law, psychosexual disorder law, there are, I'm just going to read it here. It's the Turkish family structure, unjust provocation, general morality, and obscenity. These are particular words that exist in Turkish legislation that are used to punish LGBT community. But to wrap it up, I would say if just because you don't look at it, that doesn't mean LGBTs don't exist. You just have to look at the right place, which is where you exist, schools, neighborhood, and families, and in the parliament, and also at the current unrest in Turkey, in Ankara, Istanbul, and in many places. So that would be my closing word, but I wanted to bring particular emphasis on the existence of the invisible love of lesbians, especially because it kind of gets lost in the whole LGBT. So I wanted to bring particular attention to women's same-sex relationships.
Great, thank you very much. Rachel.
I just wanted to address the question about the disability card. It's an initiative as part of the Year of the Citizen, and it's like I get free travel here because of my disability, and it's generally the same thing to open up for every country, for every citizen in every country to be able to do the same thing. So I just wanted to say finally that I suppose I wanted to kind of. My point was I'd like to see that the world is opened up more for people with disabilities. Like, I've had to kind of fight for everything I've had, and I think the world should be made a bit more, people should have more awareness of this disability and willing to be flexible and to adapt the environment for everyone.
Thank you, Rachel. And finally, Minister.
Thank you very much. And as you can see quite clearly, I am not a young person, but I have been privileged to listen to what the young people have said here today, and I think that's the context in which we are talking about. And it was mentioned earlier on by one of the speakers, Hungary, that many young people have no meaningful place in life in the European Union at the present.